Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The SparkFile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart creative people don't go it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're an OG listener, welcome back, Sparkly Sparkler. Sparkler, 4th of July. If you're joining us for the first time, know that all are welcome here.
Whether you've put your creativity on pause during this time or you've clung to it like a lifeline, either way, welcome.
But you might be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? What do I file in it, for God's sakes? These are such good questions, and we actually do have answers.
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and fascinations.
Here's the deal. We are makers. We are making all kinds of things over here.
And if you're like us and you make stuff all the time, or you want to make stuff all the time, you know that the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry, especially now.
But don't despair, because we are here for you, and we are on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Yeah, like this podcast.
Right? Or a conscious approach to addressing the visceral fears that can surround our creativity.
Ooh, I like that. Every episode, we're going to reach into the Spark File and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us as well.
And if you're not careful, you might just breathe a deep sigh of relief. So without further ado, let's open up the Spark File. Oh, Camion.
Blackwell, how you doing?
I am doing well. I worked, no complaints. I'm so thankful and happy to have the work I have. But when you go to work, you never know how long you're going to be there. You can guesstimate, but you kind of don't know how long your day is going to be. So I just had an unexpectedly late night last night, and then we were scheduled to spark it out this morning. So
do we have your grovelly morning voice today?
I think we might hear some things coming up this morning.
I like it.
But
I like all parts of you, Suze, including your morning voice.
Cams. And it was a fun, happy day at work, because it was just, we all knew that everybody was going to get to do some fun stuff on the holiday weekend. And so, nice. Yeah, it was a really fun, really fun day. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Everybody was in pretty good spirits. They were tired, but they seemed happy.
Yeah. A little bit of time off will do that.
Isn't it interesting how even if the time off, it's that thing where if you have something in your future that is exciting to you, it completely flavors
100%. And I
today.
think about that in terms of like lifespan as well. Like they talk about retirees and people who, later in life are like truly though having those benchmarks of like, oh, we have a family reunion coming up. Oh, there's a holiday. Or I'm going to see my grandkids. Or we're taking a trip. Those things that they say really do make the difference in terms of like continuing to live and to have that thing to look forward to. Mm-hmm.
You know what I thought you were going to say, which is just anecdotal. I don't know if there's been a study done, but it seems pretty basic. I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my colleagues. Yeah. They're a little bit younger, and I was encouraging them to start saving for their retirement now. Something that they hadn't done yet. They just finished working through their student loans. And I was like, could you now take that money and start saving for your retirement? And I was saying to them, I started saving a teeny tiny amount for my retirement when I was young. Yeah. And just have so slow and steady, like small and steady for years and years and years. And when times were lean, I had to dial it back. And when times were better, I would dial it up. And now I'm at a place where maybe I shouldn't talk about this on the podcast. Don't come for me in my retirement savings, but having that makes
it's all relative, by the way, everybody. It's all
relative. It's modest. It's a modest sum. But having it makes me feel a sense of peace when I think about it.
That's right.
Knowing that if I live to retirement age, because who fucking knows, but if I do that, I won't be eating the proverbial cat food. It gives me a sense of peace.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that before about old people eating cat food?
No. You know what? Did you see my face? I was like, cat food. No.
That's a thing. That's a thing people say.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting because actually canned cat food is probably more expensive than a can of tuna. But I think it's a thing that people say.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Or maybe it's just a thing I say. I don't know.
It's a vision you were having, but not anymore thanks to retirement savings. Yeah,
that's right. So, Laura Camion, can we tell the people about our experiment?
Yes, let's tell everyone about this experiment we're doing today.
We're doing an experiment today. Earlier this week, I reached out to Laura Camion because I was like, Laura, my spark has grown. It's such a deep topic and it has grown so large. I think if I spark you and you spark me back, it's going to be like the Mahabharata. We're going to be doing a 7-hour episode.
Day long.
It's all day. There's an intermission. There's a meal break. And then you come back and you get the second half. So we're going to try an experiment and I'm going to do a spark. I'm going to spark Laura and it's going to be the full meal deal. So that's the experiment today.
It's going to be a happy meal. And then some, yeah.
So if you're like, this is really long,
because we're doing Susie's spark today. Yeah. And then I'll spark Sue's with mine and that'll be next week.
Yeah. So,
we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
You're always welcome to write us and tell us, like if you loved this experiment, if you hated this experiment. Let us know. No big deal.
I don't know if you get a vote, but listener, we love you, but you might not get a vote.
I'll tally the votes, but still, we're probably going to do what we need to do. But Suze, I'm excited for this spark of yours.
Shall I dig in?
Please do.
So, Cams, my spark today has been decades in the making.
Oh my gosh.
And I am excited to share this with you. I feel like I'm going to go deep, but not nearly deep enough. And we can, one of the reasons why is the more I dug, the more I learned. And everybody, it seems like, who has an opinion about this sees it through a distinct lens of their specialty. And there's a lot of angles to this. So just because I didn't want this single spark to be the 7-hour Mahabharata, the coast of utopia, Tom Stoppard. This is going to be, again, I feel like it's going to be long AF and it's still the tip of the iceberg. So,
hey, that's all right. We can always re-spark it. Spark back at you later. Go level 2.
Spark 2, Electric Boogaloo. Absolutely. Okay. So resources for this Spark came from the Off-Camera Show with Sam Jones, the H3 podcast, genius.com, Reddit, an article by Carmen Gallo on Forbes.com, an article on Grammy.com by Bruce Britt, and many other sources that I'm going to reference along the way. But the initial kindling that launched 1,000 sparks that made me want to dig in and finally pull all of this together was Bo Burnham's Netflix special, Inside. Laura Camion, have you watched Inside?
I have not.
Oh.
Okay. On the list.
So do you know Bo Burnham?
And not well.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So if you don't know, Bo Burnham is a comedian, a writer, a singer, a songwriter, a screenwriter, an actor, a director. He wrote and directed the film 8th Grade. Did you see that movie?
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
I think we've talked about it on this podcast. Like it just captured that time in it seemed so much more authentic than any representation of that time in life that I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's amazing to me that a 20-something guy captured this, but man, did he capture it. Bo Burnham recently played the male lead in Promising Young Woman opposite Carey Mulligan, if you saw that movie.
Yeah, I did.
He really is something. He's a sparky, creative dynamo. And he got started when he was really young as sort of this YouTube sensation who wrote these funny, silly, stupid songs. And now he's in his early 30s and he has really matured as an artist. So that Netflix special, Inside, was written, filmed, lit, directed, and edited by Bo Burnham during pandemic quarantine in his small little creative work studio. And there are very funny moments, but there's also, it just beautifully captures 2020 in this time capsule in such a creative way. And it also captures this artist who typically plays to big live crowds, ostensibly trapped inside by a pandemic. But it also seems that they are trapped inside by some other things too.
Interesting.
Near the end of the show, there's this song called All Eyes on Me, and there's a spoken interlude, which is delivered to a cheering crowd that isn't really there. He's still in his little studio, and the crowd is just sound effects. So you hear people cheering and laughing, and he's got this heavy distortion filter on his voice. In that spoken interlude, he says these words. You want to hear a funny story? So 5 years ago, I quit performing live comedy because I was beginning to have severe panic attacks while on stage, which is not a great place to have them. So I quit and I didn't perform for 5 years. And I spent that time trying to improve myself mentally. And then he goes on, and you know what? I did. I got better. I got so much better, in fact, that in January of 2020, I thought, you know what? I should start performing again. I've been hiding from the world and I need to re-enter. And then the funniest thing happened, which is, of course, referring to the global pandemic. And even saying that, it just makes me feel emotional. But this caught my ear because Bo Burnham from the outside is this highly skilled solo performer who has an incredible command of himself on stage. His performances, especially these more recent performances that he's done, tours and specials, they include a lot of pre-recorded passages and music and lighting. It's complex. It's obviously painstakingly rehearsed and lit and stage managed. His shows are like precisely timed Swiss watches. And you can just imagine like they're calling these cute, I sat in the booth one time for The Lion King with my friend Tom Reynolds, who was calling that show.
Yeah.
And I watched Tom Reynolds calling that show, and it's like, there are times when he's like, Q107A, lights go, flying go, 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 go. And I'm like, that's what it's like during certain passages of Bo Burnham's stand-up comedy show. So they look like a Swiss watch. And from the outside, his shows just flow, but he has described them as being very rigid, which makes sense to me. Oh, and sidebar, his lighting design is fucking believable. Guess who his lighting designer is?
Who?
Mark Janowitz.
What? Mark
Yes.
Janowitz?
It's Mark Janowitz.
Oh my gosh. I need to pop a note to Mark. This is a great.
I would love to do a makersode. Mark Janowitz, the reason why Laura made that face is I was in doing research for this. I was looking through the credits of Inside to make sure that Bo Burnham had really done all of those things. And there was a special thanks to Mark Janowitz. And I was like, Mark Janowitz, who we know as a young lighting designer.
Blue Man Group and Title of
That's
Show.
right. That's right. And did he work on Title of Show?
Didn't it early ones? Because he helped with all Bridge Club productions way back in the day.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Bridge Club Productions, of course, is Laura Camian's production company. So Mark Janowitz has been a collaborator of Bo Burnham's. And I will tell you, even before I knew it was Mark Janowitz, I was going around town saying,
this lighting design.
it's nuts. But there's a special thanks to Mark Janowitz on Inside. And I was like, and then I tracked it back and I was like, we have to do a makersode with Mark Janowitz.
We're calling Mark today.
And he's like, I'm busy. He's become a huge lighting designer and a lot in the concert space, like big, amazing artists. He's amazing. He's amazing. Hi, Mark.
Hi,
if you're
Mark,
listening to this, we love you. And we're so happy for your success and we love your work. So I always remember Mark Janowitz as being just like the sweetest, kindest little sweetie.
And a smart motherfucker.
Talented. Yeah.
I never used the term motherfucker. I don't know why that came out, but he is seriously like so smart. One of those guys that you're just like, oh shit. Okay. There's a couple guys in here, smartest guys in the room. And then
there's the actual quiet, smartest guy in the room.
And then he is like super like quiet, sweet, kind, and very knowledgeable and very talented.
Yeah.
Like so, how many more adjectives could we attach to Mark Janowitz's
We love you, Mark
name?
Janowitz.
We love you, Mark.
We'll see you on the Sparkfile podcast very soon. So, so back to Bo Burnham's shows. They are highly cued. They are very technically they require technical accuracy. They're, to use his word, rigid. And as it turns out, he was not kidding about those panic attacks. According to an annotation on the lyric site genius.com, Bo Burnham discussed this during a 2016 Reddit Ask Me Anything to promote his special at the time, Make Happy. I'm assuming you have not seen Make Happy. Okay. So when asked which of his songs from the Make Happy special was closest to his heart, he responded, "The Kanye bit at the end of this last special is the one I think I'm happiest with." Listeners, if you haven't seen it, this is Susan talking, not Bo Burnham. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend this piece, this Kanye rant. I'm obsessed with this particular song that he's talking about and his performance of it. So pause this recording and go Google Bo Burnham Kanye rant. Sidebar, Laura, I sent this to one of our clients the other day and said, watch this because this is a way that you can put your lived experience, including your pain, in your work in all sorts of different ways. So back to that 2016 Reddit Ask Me Anything with Bo Burnham, Bo goes on. After my previous special, I started to have panic attacks while on stage, and it made performing really stressful and terrifying for a little while. And so I wanted to try to find a way to talk about that. It's the bit I'm most proud of because it came from something I was pretty ashamed of and didn't even really want to admit to myself. And performing the Kanye song actually made me feel less anxious because now my anxiety was part of the show.
Yes.
Rather than being this anvil hanging over my head on stage that could drop at any moment, this thing I had to just ignore and power through, it became part of the story. Once I gave it a purpose, it receded a bit. Laura, talk about if you have to live through it, you might as well make something out of it. I love this piece. It's so funny. It's so funny. And then he just drops in and he never says the words panic attack, but he just is so honest with the audience about how he has this relationship with them where he's like, part of me loves you, part of me hates you, part of me fears you, part of me, and it's just like,
wow.
All with that fucking baller Mark Janowitz lighting going on. It is, I've watched it so many times. I'm obsessed with it.
I can't wait. I am sorry that I have not watched it yet.
Listen, no apologies. What are you, a goddamn psychic? Okay,
yeah.
so
what am I? Goddamn psychic? I'm not.
But all of this also reminded me of that Fred Rogers wisdom. What is mentionable becomes manageable.
Oh,
so by surfacing it, both talking about it in his private life and talking about it on stage, you heard him say, that's when it started to become manageable.
That's right. That is right.
Yeah.
Like totally relate to this. Obviously nothing on this scale, but you and I have both written things that it's like, you know what? If I'm going to be standing here on stage doing this, I want to write in a section that allows me to tell the truth right now. And in doing so, like it calms the body. Like you're suddenly like everything is congruent. Die
Vampire Die is me standing on stage. I'm not performing it right now. Was me standing on stage saying, here's a parade of things that stop me from being free.
Yes.
And here is the deepest truth of all. Like really, people always asked me why I performed so much of title of show barefoot. That was a big thing. Really noticed that. And I've got to tell you, like to stand on a stage, like barefoot, grounded, and just tell the unvarnished truth to 1,000 people, no jazz hands, no, smoke and mirrors, like to just do that. It's crazy what that will do in a positive way for your nervous system.
It's huge. Electra Speaks was that for me as well. And every bit of it was like, here it is. And I mean, I'm so excited about this Spark, Suze, because I think it's so powerful. And for people to embrace this idea, not that I need to go on stage and pretend to feel a way I'm not feeling, but rather how can I write into it, like weave it throughout to address the feelings that are actually happening in my body.
Absolutely. And as we're talking about this, we're off-road here. This isn't written into my Spark, but it's when I started really doing that, I'll get into it in a minute, but I had a real turning point with my own performance anxiety and to consistently night after night stand on stage and speak that truth. It changed the course of my life and my career. Yeah.
This is such a hot spark, Suze.
Hot sparks coming through.
Good.
Watch out. Watch your fingers.
Good.
Careful. That spark is real hot. It's like when they put a cast iron thing down
sizzling.
on you. Ooh, so dramatic. So, in an interview that Bo did with Sam Jones on the show Off Camera, Bo said at the very beginning of his tour, he was performing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in front of a huge audience. And about 10 minutes in, he had tunnel vision, shortness of breath, and this numb out of body feeling. And he just powered through. And after that show, he sobbed and sobbed backstage because he didn't know what was happening and he didn't have words for it. But what that was a panic attack. And talk about, he subsequently had about 10 panic attacks in succession at subsequent stage shows. So at the kicking off this tour, just panic attack, panic attack, panic attack. He had one when he was commuting between two cities to get to the next night's show, panic attack on the train. And talk about what it looks like on the outside and what it feels like on the inside. He said that he can watch himself, like a footage of himself performing, recorded while he was having a panic attack, and he cannot see the external signs of the panic attack. Or his parents can be in the audience watching him live, and they can't tell he's having a panic attack. These people that know and love him well. But on the inside, he said having the anxiety feels so visceral, like he is riding a bull, and the bull is his nervous system, and that he just has to hold on to it. And he continues the metaphor by saying that being in the world feels like everyone else is an equestrian, perfectly in sync with their nervous systems. But he says it just isn't true. There are so many silent battles that people are fighting with their nervous systems. I relate to this so deeply, Laura.
Yes.
I just saw you notating something. Do you have thoughts?
All of that. All of it. Yeah. I mean, the panic, we were talking the other day with a client about panic attacks, and I had one a couple years ago that I went to the hospital. I was so concerned, and it was like in the middle of the night. And I remember my therapist telling me that your brain changes after you have had one. Your brain now has a new awareness of the possibility of having one. Whereas prior to that, you just almost like didn't know that could happen. And then your brain has like a new level of consciousness of like, oh, that could happen. And
that's a possibility.
It piles on. Yeah.
Yes. And that fear can beget fear, et cetera. If you don't sort of, intervene, disrupt it, and figure out some strategies for dealing with it.
It can be a gift that your brain knows. It can be a gift because you can, like you said, if you can identify what those signs are.
That's right.
And try to get ahead of it.
There are so many people in our world who we know and love. Celia Keenan-Bolger has shared about having a panic attack during one of the shows of To Kill a Mockingbird. Heidi Blickenstaff has spoken very openly and honestly about it. The thing that strikes me is people who have had this experience, it is seared in their minds. It is such a heightened experience. This is not something that Bo Burnham knows the exact count of how many panic attacks he's had, that you could say exactly when this happened, all the surrounding events. It's a big set of feelings, and it feels like a big fucking deal when you're inside of it.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. I'm excited to hear how because it sounds like Bo got a hold of some coping mechanisms, ways.
Absolutely. Some ways to process. Before we get to that, I will tell you that just from Bo's point of view, he said that he had been experiencing some form of anxiety since high school. But in high school, he just thought he had ongoing stomach problems. But in retrospect, it was anxiety. And as an adult, these panic attacks, which kept coming one after the other at the top of this 45 city tour, felt like one of the most challenging things he'd ever experienced. He said, I've had a pretty great life, but this has been one of the most, the date of that interview, one of the most challenging things he'd ever experienced, which is to our point about it's when you're in it, it is very heightened. It's super intense.
Yes.
So if you hadn't guessed, this is the spark that I want to explore today. Performance anxiety, and I'm talking about the whole gamut from a case of the nerves to panic attacks and everything in between. Those moments when we're faced with performing and fear arouses our autonomic nervous system, triggering a flight or fight or freeze reaction.
Yeah.
And to your point, Cams, perhaps most importantly, I want to explore strategies to respond to these varying degrees of anxiety.
Oh, this is amazing.
So before I continue, I just want to say that contrary to popularly held opinion, neither Laura nor I are doctors or therapists. And nothing we share today should be construed or taken as medical advice. We're just two weirdos talking. If you or someone that you care about is experiencing nerves, anxiety, panic attacks, performance anxiety, please seek professional help. I just want to open up the conversation today to hopefully extend some potential strategies to our fellow anxious souls. So let me start by defining the gamut of what we're talking about. For the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to use some of the following terms. Stage fright, that's kind of an old school.
Sort of
it's
a catch-all kind of. Yeah.
But I think performance anxiety is a term that would be more accurate. And that is, when we talk about stage fright or performance anxiety, we're talking about extreme nervousness experienced before or during participation in an activity taking place in front of an audience. And that can include a virtual audience. And just so you know, millions of people suffer from performance anxiety. And I thought this was interesting, Laura. Performance anxiety cites under social anxiety.
Interesting.
So social anxiety is the big umbrella, and then performance anxiety lives under it. And I thought this was interesting. I learned so much about myself, and learned that there's so much more that I need to learn as I was preparing this spark, because I was thinking about it. Just to reflect back, as you know, Laura, listeners, I don't remember what I say, but I recently started this job that was like, I'm working on this TV show, and it was like starting at a new high school is the closest thing that it felt like.
Yes.
Where I was meeting what seemed like 1 million new people, trying to remember everybody's names, trying to remember how to get from my dressing room to the set, getting lost a lot. I wasn't getting shoved into lockers, but everybody's doing their job. And a lot of times it's just sort of like you're invisible. And I was like, this really reminds me of when I started a new school in 7th grade. This really reminds me of when I started a new school in graduate school. This and it was both socially anxiety provoking, but performance anxiety provoking. And I was like, oh, no wonder every time I go to do this I've come so far with this stuff, but every time I would go to, you name it, an audition, a one night only benefit, guest starring on a TV show, it is this crazy combination of social anxiety and performance anxiety. And I was like, because you're meeting new people, you're in an absolutely brand new environment, you're having to sort of perform on cue. Oh my gosh.
You feel like the newbie, you have that sensation that it's only you that feels this way.
Oh yeah.
Because you tell yourself a story that everyone else knows everyone, but not always. Yeah.
But sometimes it does. I was like, I am the only one. I remember doing this benefit it was at Joe's Pub. Jesse Tyler Ferguson had invited Heidi Blickenstaff and I to perform in it. And the rest of the cast was made up of, mostly it was the original cast of Spelling Bee.
Yeah.
And it was it might've been one of the first times I met Celia, maybe. And Celia, and I remember so clearly, Celia and Lisa Howard were talking about like, oh, I like that nail polish. That looks good. I know I love wearing it, but I can't usually wear it because we can't wear nail polish in the show. Like that sort of like, just like calm chit chat, like just kikiing. And I was essentially having a panic attack. They were not being excluding, but I was just sort of like, do you know what's happening? Like I was freaking out while they were talking about nail polish. And I remember Leia Delaria saying, boy, you're really nervous, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, I felt like I had heat wiggles coming off me. I could not stop going to the bathroom. Like it was essentially a panic attack.
Yeah.
But it was that combo platter. And I think this is a Dagwood sandwich of anxiety that I have experienced experienced and struggled with for a long time of the social anxiety and the performance anxiety.
Yes.
Did you just write down Dagwood sandwich?
Yeah, I'll tell you why later. You won't believe it. You won't believe why.
Call back. So the symptoms of performance anxiety mimic a real danger to the body. The type of fear that can occur in social or performance anxiety causes the body's fight or flight or freeze response to kick in, as I just said. And the mind causes the body to overreact as though you are at serious risk. The body is essentially shutting down so you can either run away or fight, but mostly just survive. And so I'm backstage at Joe's Pub, just getting ready to sing one song from a Michael John LaChiusa musical, but I'll add with Michael John LaChiusa on piano. But my body, my mind is fine. My body thinks I'm about to be eaten by a bear.
Like it feels like you might die. Like those are the stakes. Those are the consequences at hand.
That I'm on the show alone and there is a grizzly bear batting the outside of my tent. Yes. So according to WebMD, symptoms may include, we should speed this up like they do on a drug commercial, racing pulse and rapid breathing, dry mouth, tight throat, trembling hands, knees, lips, and voice, sweaty and cold hands, nausea, and an uneasy feeling in the stomach, vision changes. And of course, speaking of an uneasy feeling in the stomach, if you've ever listened to this podcast or been in a room with me before a performance, I'll add the evacuation of the bowels, AKA shitting myself. So, Camian, this is a nice podcast. Why do we have to take it there? I always feel like I'm mildly scandalizing you.
Always.
But it's good. It's good for you. So it toughens you up.
It's character building.
My highly sensitive friend. Okay. So that's performance anxiety. But what is a panic attack? According to the website for the Mayo Clinic, a panic attack is a sudden episode of intense fear that triggers severe physical reactions when there is no real danger or apparent cause. Panic attacks may be very frightening, and when they occur, you might think you're losing control, having a heart attack, or even dying. If you've had recurrent unexpected panic attacks and spent long periods in constant fear of another attack, you may have a condition called panic disorder. Although panic attacks themselves aren't life-threatening, they can be frightening and significantly affect your quality of life. But treatment can be very effective. Panic attacks may have many variations, but symptoms usually peak within minutes. Panic attacks typically include some of these signs or symptoms: sense of impending doom or danger, fear of loss of control or death, rapid pounding heart rate, sweating, trembling or shaking, shortness of breath or tightness in your throat, chills, hot flashes, nausea, abdominal cramping, chest pain, headache, dizziness, lightheadedness or faintness, numbness or tingling sensation, feeling of unreality or detachment, and you may feel fatigued and worn out after a panic attack subsides. So I'm going to add to this list future fear. According to the Mayo Clinic website, one of the worst things about panic attacks is the intense fear that you'll have another one. This is to your point, Laura. You may fear having panic attacks so much that you avoid certain situations where they may occur. So for me, that was, well, fuck, if this is what is woven into the experience of certain kinds of performing, I don't want to do that anymore.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. You might be like, I'll take a pass on that.
I'll take a pass. I have to say, in some ways, things like we were talking about, Die Vampire Die, Electra Speaks, I'll add this podcast to the list. This podcast is a response to performance anxiety and panic attacks because it's a space where I can perform. It's performative in a sense.
Yes.
Without fear. So it's really good for my nervous system. It bolsters my confidence that performance, even one-time only performance, can have no fear attached to it. My nervous system isn't jacked up right now. Yeah.
So good.
So that's what we're dealing with here. And it can be pretty intense as you hear us saying this. I'm curious, Laura, you have had a Did your panic attack like happen in the middle of the night?
It happened in the middle of the night. I woke
that's a thing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, because I was like, what was that? Was I dreaming? Like, what in the world triggered this? Yeah.
Middle of the night. Have you had one around performance?
You know what comes up for me that I still laugh about this? Yes. But something that happened to me on stage once, on stage, please. I was in college. I was on the speech and debate team.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just get that out of the way. I was a public speaker and I loved it.
Yeah.
But one of the first times that I was asked to like do my speech in front of like all the elders, like I was young on the team. And then it was like, here, you will all do your speeches in front of the,
like the senior
for practice.
Yeah.
And by the way, these were like national debate champions and speech, champions. So this was not like lightweights. So I had to give my speech and something happened. I was giving my speech and Susan, my right leg started shaking, just my right leg. I continued to give my speech. I tried to do all the things that I normally would do. Like if your hands are shaking, like, if you get yourself you focus your mind on something else, but before you know it, like it's not happening anymore. My leg kept shaking and I was wearing pants. And so it was visible and the pants were shaking. And then I could see people looking down at my right leg. And I would try to like take 3 steps to the right, give some more of the speech, leg still shaking, take 3 steps to the left, leg still shaking. I was like, the more it just went on and it never stopped through the course of it. It also never happened again. But throughout the rest of my life, I'm like, what if my right leg starts shaking uncontrollably and I can't do anything about it? So that is like one of the worst to me. Like that was just one of the nightmare scenarios.
Wow.
But nothing ever happened as bad as that ever again.
The case of the shaky right leg, a Hardy Boys mystery.
But how bizarre, right?
Well, I'll tell you, when I have these experiences, it is not uncommon for me to know exactly where the adrenaline is going. And sometimes it will go into my quads. Sometimes it will go, when I talk about that electric shock to my butt.
Yes.
Sometimes it will go into my butt. And then there's almost like a physical body hangover where it feels like I have exerted my quads or my butt. And I have a theory. I am not a doctor and this is based on nothing but intuition. I wonder if it is sending adrenaline to those areas to get you to run.
Oh, I think you're totally right. And then those muscles are like, but I'm not supposed to be running right now. So I've got a little extra adrenaline.
I'm supposed to be grounded and giving this talk.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because those are the big, aren't those your butt, your gluteus maximus, your legs? Those are some of the biggest muscles in your body.
Yep.
That get you to locomote.
Heck yeah. Suze, you're a effing genius.
I don't know about it. I'm making shit up. And I'm sure there's a scientist or a doctor that's not listening to this that could tell us otherwise. But I think that this is, to Bo Burnham's point, it can seem like everybody around you is in sync with their nervous system, like a neural equestrian. But I think that this is pretty common and it shows up for all sorts of people, not necessarily like, you don't have to be a Broadway performer to have this show up. You can be trying to deliver a book report. You can be giving a sales presentation. This shows up in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And I will tell you, when I experience this, it feels like it is taking years off my life. It feels like it is running my nervous system so into the red that the thought that I have is, Mike, and I have like sort of a hangover afterwards.
Yep.
That fatigue that they're talking about, it feels like it's really not good for my longevity is what it feels like.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And Suze, I wanted to mention this and I wanted to get it right when I did. I'm remembering my therapist telling me that there is a difference between a panic attack and a and an anxiety attack, which I thought was interesting. Panic attacks can typically come out of the blue, i.e., like I'm sleeping, I'm literally
Yes.
asleep, right?
Yeah.
It can come out of the blue, but they also typically have a time limit and typically do not last longer than, say, 10 minutes, those symptoms in your body. Now, not that you won't have a hangover, but if you are aware of it, you can know this is going to pass.
Uh-huh.
Now, an anxiety attack, typically that isn't actually called an attack because anxiety will build over time, right?
Yes. Yes.
And the attack part of it is something that it builds up to, and you feel that, but you can actually be living with low grade or mid grade anxiety over long, long stretches of time.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that. I did not, that's one of the many, I'm sure, the volumes of things that I did not surface when I was preparing for this. And this clarifies something for me.
Yeah.
Because this whole time that I was living it, preparing it for this spark today and sharing it with you, I was like, what I have felt, I've never called it a panic attack, but I was like, is that what I have? But I think what I have is anxiety attacks because it can start building
Yes.
days before.
Yes.
This twist, this low grade tension will start to build. And then as it gets closer and closer to like go time, it's, oh God.
And that's why I think the term performance anxiety is the right term. Like that makes perfect sense because it is, yes, it is building up. And then, you know, whether it peaks the day before, whether it peaks during the performance, you know, it can peak at any point, but it is, you know, it's something you're experiencing for a longer period of time.
Interesting. And while Bo Burnham was talking about, not that he's the only person that's had a panic attack, but we reference him, was talking about this intense 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then like there's the drop afterward with the sobbing and the fatigue and all of that.
That's right.
That's Laura. Thank you. That is so clarifying.
It took me a minute to recollect it, but I was like, oh, my therapist told me something really useful.
I wrote it down somewhere. I put it in some Spark file somewhere. If you know what we're talking about, if you've experienced it, let's roll into what can be done to manage and process these varying degrees and manifestations of anxiety. In my quest for some actionable clarity on this, I have taken a deep dive on this topic over the course of many years. And what I've discovered, Laura, is that there is not a single clear-cut solution for everyone because every body and every nervous system is different. Each situation is distinct and everyone's triggers, if you will, are distinct. And the severity of this even varies from person to person. But I thought it might be helpful to share a bunch of potential tools that folks could potentially find helpful if they're struggling with this. And again, did I mention that we're not doctors and nothing we say should be construed as medical advice? Did you catch that, listener?
I got it.
Okay,
I
good.
got it.
So jumping back to what were we going to say?
Thanks for the reminder. Sometimes I need it.
Yeah,
not a doctor,
I know.
Laura.
I know, that ego. So jumping back to Bo Burnham, on the H3 podcast, he said that he feared if he admitted that he was having this experience, if he said it, it would make it real, and that by speaking it, he would never stop thinking about it. So he just lived with it and like the silent pain of that.
Yeah.
Oh,
pain
God,
and
can you
shame.
imagine pain and shame? That shame piece is such a, that is a potent cocktail combination. Oof. But he went on to say for him, it actually is the exact opposite. He said, speaking of it is the salvation. By speaking it out loud and by seeing that other people were going through it, in essence, that he wasn't unique and that he wasn't alone. That's when he could begin to get a handle on it. And I don't want to jump my own spark, but let me remind you, he put it straight into his work. So what do we make of it? You could make a piece that's your version of Die Vampire Die or his Kanye rant. Like that is
Yeah.
There's all different sorts of ways to get it up and out and talk about it. And that can be with a counselor, that can be with a beloved and trusted discussion partner, that can be on stage. You can paint it into the Scream by Edvard Munch or your version of it. Like there's lots of ways to acknowledge it and get it up and out. Speaking of, you're not unique and you're not alone. On that same podcast, Bo Burnham talked about something that really helped him, learning that Barbra Streisand and Adele also struggle with severe performance anxiety.
Yeah.
There was an article in The Atlantic entitled Performance Anxiety in Great Performers, written by Scott Stossel. And Scott shares an unbelievable list of notable folks who have struggled with performance anxiety. The aforementioned Barbra Streisand developed overwhelming performance anxiety at the height of her career, and for 27 years, she refused to perform for the general public, appearing live only in private clubs and at charity events.
Wow.
Carly Simon abandoned the stage for 7 years after collapsing from nerves before a concert in 1981.
Oof.
The singer Donny Osmond, who I absolutely adored as a child, had panic attacks during performances for a number of years. Hugh Grant several times has announced that he was considering retiring from acting because he has said that he suffers from panic attacks when the cameras start rolling, which I relate to deeply. There's something about on-camera work that can really trip my trigger. Hugh said, I had all these panic attacks. They're awful. I freeze like a rabbit, can't speak, can't think, sweating like a bull. When he got home from doing a particular job, he said to himself, no more acting, end of films. So you can see how life-altering this can be for folks.
I'm so glad he didn't quit. Yes.
It's that painful.
Yes.
But it's weird because you're like, oh, it's not like you're getting shot with a gun. It's not like you're getting stabbed, but
your
it
body is.
The experience inside your body is so painful. It's painful mentally. It's painful physically. It's so scary. Like it is so much.
I think it's terrifying because it feels like your body,
you're dying.
You're out of control. Like your body's running one way. Your mind is running another. You're trying to be like, wait, can't my mind help control my body? And it can't. Like your heart is racing and you can't get it to stop, or your leg is shaking and you can't get it to stop. It's so terrifying.
There's a lyric in one of the Bo Burnham songs in the special Inside where he references derealization, which can be a hallmark. That can also be included. I just mentioned it. It can be part of a panic attack. And derealization, I'm going to get this half wrong, but derealization is when all of a sudden you're overcome with the sensation that none of this is real. So imagine you're on stage and you're acting. I was listening in preparing this. This isn't in the Spark that I wrote, but the comedian and writer Michael Showalter, who made and stars in Wet Hot American Summer, talked about doing this play, like this off-Broadway classical play. And he had a panic attack during the show. And all of a sudden he looked around him and had this, thought ringing through his head, which was, none of this is real. None of this is real, which is another level of mind fuckery that can happen when you're experiencing this. It's a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Wow. I was thinking The Matrix. This is all made up.
Yeah.
I'm inside a game. Wow.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Another person who you may not know experienced feelings similar to this, Gandhi. Gandhi called it the awful strain of public speaking, and it prevented him for years from speaking up, even at dinner parties. It nearly deterred him from developing into the spiritual leader he ultimately became.
Wow.
There's a instance cited where Gandhi stood up to read remarks that he had prepared for a small gathering of the local vegetarian society, and he found that he could not speak. He said, my vision became blurred and I trembled through the speech. In his 2010 autobiography, I Am Ozzy, rocker Ozzy Osbourne said, to say that I suffer from pre-show nerves is like saying that when you get hit by an atom bomb, it hurts a bit.
You know what, Suze? I'm not saying I know this to be true about Ozzy Osbourne, but it does make me think about the number of performers who have substance abuse issues.
I'm about to drop it on you.
You are. Drop it.
Yeah.
Drop it.
Yeah. Adele has admitted that she vomits before nearly every concert due to stage fright.
Oh my gosh.
And in a 2011 interview with Rolling Stone, she said, "I'm scared of audiences. I get shitty scared. One show in Amsterdam, I was so nervous that I escaped out the fire exit. So there's your flight."
Oh my God.
She said, "I've thrown up a couple of times, I'll say. Once in Brussels, I projectile vomited on someone."
Oh,
yeah.
God.
But the list, Camion, if you have struggled with any of this, you should know you are not alone. And the list goes on and on. Luciano Pavarotti, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Rod Stewart, Chopin, Renee Fleming, Glenn Gould, Vladimir Horowitz, our sweet C. Keenan Bolger and Heidi Blickenstaff. There's an article on Grammy.com by Bruce Britt, and Bruce cites a case in point for the perils of stage fright. Guitar legend Eddie Van Halen, who for years hid his struggles with performance anxiety. In Esquire magazine, Eddie said, "When I started playing in front of people, I'd get so damn nervous. And to quell his nerves, one day, Eddie sampled a pre-performance cigarette and some alcohol. And he said, for so long, it really did work."
Oof.
Until it doesn't. But it's one of the reasons that a lot of musicians don't play sober. But clearly it's not a workable long-term response.
No. You're just trading in, one issue for another.
I think it's kicking the can down the road. I think it's deferring. It's sort of masking it. But if you want to continue to do this work, at some point, you're going to have to resolve the problem of potential substance abuse.
That's right.
And then, do you know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah. So if substance abuse isn't a workable solution, let's talk about what might be a workable response to anxiety when it comes to performing. Cams, there are so many varying thoughts on this. And I think a lot of it depends on who you're seeking counsel from, because they're going to view it through the lens of their expertise. So if you're talking to a psychiatrist, they may be inclined to prescribe medication. If you're talking to a Reiki healer, they're going to prescribe Reiki healing. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
But it's also another clear illustration that there is not a one size fits all solution.
That's right.
To
it's about
performance anxiety.
Finding, what does it for you? What helps
what
you?
does it for your little chemistry set? Because we're all different little walking, talking chemistry sets. And all of us, again, have those specific things that may bring on the anxiety response. So we do have to explore what are the things or the combination of things that are going to work for each individual. So if you are listening to this, and if you're struggling with performance anxiety, all the way up to panic attacks around performing, we're just going to give you a bunch of sparks to serve as a starting point for your personal investigation. So something that you hear echoed frequently is that when it comes to performance anxiety, strong preparation is key. It's not always the solution. And sometimes in my case, I can overcompensate and get into like drilling, which becomes a different sort of issue. But I do think that strong preparation is key. For me, having to memorize and deliver lines in a one-time only situation, like a one-night only benefit or a one-time only speech or filming a movie, that could really trigger me. But if I take the time, if I have the time to learn the lines slowly and really feel confident with them, that preparation can bring me back to like good performance energy that is commensurate with the task at hand. So I'm a little bit nervous, but just enough adrenaline to get the job done. Yeah.
I think this one is so interesting because it seems like a no-brainer. Of course, prepare. But the number of people who, we know and probably have done this ourselves once or twice, who will equate not preparing. I think you did a spark, that touched on this.
I'm going to keep it easy and breezy.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it easy and breezy.
That's right. Maybe I won't feel the anxiety if I keep it light by like not preparing. And the opposite, you actually have to fight against that and say, I'm going to really prepare for this, which means I care. So you do have to acknowledge I care about the outcome.
Yeah.
It makes you face it, but it also, also can be perhaps an antidote to not feeling the anxiety once the moment arrives.
Yeah. I agree. Oh yeah, we did. I talked about that in my Spark on preparation. Yeah. And again, even as we're saying this, it's going to be different for each person.
That's right.
Something that I have discovered, and it's one of the reasons this podcast is a performative experience that feels safe to me, partially because I'm just talking to my friend Cam's, partially because I know it's editable and I have control over that, but also it's because there's no memorization involved. When I get into the realm of memorization, I have really, I think I don't remember if I talked about this on the preparation Spark, but I can remember one of my earliest performance experiences. I was little, I must have been 5 or 6, and it was during a dance recital, public dance recital, and I got out on stage, and it was then that I realized it's sort of the actor's nightmare. I didn't know the dance.
Yep.
And I froze and walked off stage. And the audience went, oh, because a 6-year-old just lost their shit and walked off stage sullenly. So, but I think it's one of the reasons why I can have the tendency, and I'm not condoning this, but I can have the tendency to over drill and just be like, am I going to be able to get this out with the time?
In any circumstance, if someone, threw something on the stage in this moment, will I still remember these lines? Will I still be fully present?
If somebody showgirls me and just like threw gems on the stage and tried to trip me up,
if my scene partner never arrives and they're, can I fill this time? You like prepare so much so that no matter what happens.
So there's that risk. Yeah. And there's also, when you're living a busy life, say you're doing a show and you're having to also do press appearances for that show, or you're very, very busy and you have to prepare for an audition, say, or a talk that you're giving, rarely do you have enough time to prepare as thoroughly as you would like to. Yeah. The next thing that I'd like to get into is what I think fall into the realm of what I'll call developing a managed mind. I'm going to do a whole Spark on this, the managed mind, but there are several approaches that utilize consciously managing your thoughts in order to influence how you feel. So I'll call this bucket of potential tools the managed mind bucket. So for example, because of my own performance anxiety, I often ask just habitually, if I'm in a situation and I'm nervous and it could be that it's actors waiting to be called to set to film, or we're sitting in the green room before a one night only benefit. I often, and this is a way of voicing my fear, will turn to the people around me and I'll say, do you get nervous? I do this all the time. I remember standing backstage with Michelle and Deganicello and her band members before we were going to take the stage. I was the master of ceremonies for this gala. She was the first act to perform. And I said, do you all ever get nervous before you perform? And Michelle and each of her band members answered the question. And she told me a story that one of her, I think it was her pianist, vomited on the keyboard. Was that nervous? Oh. That is an evening you'd never forget. So I remember just recently, did we talk about this on the podcast? I asked Jane Lynch, we were sitting in hair and makeup before, and I was like,
we did.
Do you ever get nervous? And everybody, it is so common. Yes. People get
asking about it, Sue, is like normalizes it. It does bring that to the surface of like, oh, instead of me standing backstage trying to pretend I'm not feeling the way I'm feeling, I actually can verbalize the way I'm feeling now, or typically feel. It's a real gift, actually, I think, to everyone around you to ask that question.
I ask all the people. So some years back to this point, I was talking to Broadway's Betty Buckley, who you all might know She was the stepmom on Eight Is Enough, but she was also the original Grisabella in Cats, just to name two of her many credits. But Betty is also a wonderful teacher. And I asked her if she ever gets nervous around performing. And Laura, I will never, ever forget what she said. I don't know if I've said this on the pod before, but enjoy it again. She said that she doesn't think of it as stage fright or performance anxiety. She thinks of it as the body preparing to do something extraordinary.
Nice.
That's how she manages her mind.
Yes.
And I think of this all the time. If you have worked with me as a teacher, I say this all the time, that this is normal and it is the body preparing itself to do something extraordinary. What Bo Burnham is trying to accomplish on stage and make it look effortless is extraordinary. And I just want to note for myself that the challenge for me is when the body's response is not commensurate with the performance at hand. So I might be trying to shoot a scene in an unfamiliar environment that has a lot of technical jargon that I have to say, so it appears that it comes easily and breezily to me. And my body is responding like I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So it's when my body's chemical response is disproportionate to the task at hand. That's when I feel like I'm riding that rodeo bull that Bo Burnham was talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And it feels like I got to get this under control because it's running away with me when really what I need to do is just step into frame and seem like I'm in control of my body. And I do not feel in control of my body at all.
Yeah. But I will say that those words that Betty shared, your body is preparing to do something extraordinary, really do work when my nerves are a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
When it's not like a full-blown anxiety attack.
Yeah, it makes sense.
In my experience, that sort of mild performance anxiety can be addressed by that sort of mind management. And here's another example that echoes what Betty shared. In Carmine Gallo's article on Forbes.com, they say, let's stop calling it stage fright and begin calling it what it is, performance energy. Stage fright sounds scary and overwhelming, yet it's perfectly natural and it's a good thing. And again, that works for me. Calling it performance energy works for me.
Yeah.
When it's a little more manageable. If you're Adele, and he actually used the example of Adele, and you're projectile vomiting, I don't think it could be one tool in your toolkit to say, this is what performance energy looks like, but I don't think it's going to completely solve it.
Yeah, it's not always going to solve it. But I have to say, I've had some success with that, even, just in my younger years when nervous, but / excited, to focus on the excitement part and to remind myself mentally, like, we've all been that person who's watching something, a performance or an audition. You're like, ooh, let me up there. I want to do that. I totally know I can nail that. So I remember that energy. And when going on, and if I feel like I'm really nervous / excited, I focus on that excited part. And I'm like, Laura, you chose this. You're excited for this. You want to do this. You remember how you felt when you weren't doing this and you were watching someone do this. Now you get to do this. Isn't that exciting? And just sort of flipping it in that way. It doesn't always work, but
But listen, this is the next thing I was going to say. There is a little bit of flipping the script to view a performance as a good challenge instead of a bad threat.
Yes.
So what you're talking about, that energizes a sense of personal agency, and it gives one the sense that you have a say in what is happening.
And you chose it. Yes, you chose
remember
this.
That you asked for this. Remember that you wanted this. Remember that you asked for this. Remember that you wanted this. It's a little song Hunter Bell and I sing to each other.
Yes.
Hunter Bell and I sing that song to each other in moments like this. Remember that you asked for this. Remember that you wanted this. Remember that you wanted this. But it's also the reason why we would circle up before title of show. And now hear this. We would circle up. We put our arms around each other and we would breathe in through the nose. We'd breathe out through the mouth. We'd look in each other's eyes and we would say, enjoyment. Let's flavor this. Remember that we get to do this.
Fun.
This is fun. It can sometimes feel like a scary thrill ride, but let's flavor it with enjoyment.
That's right.
That's all part of having a managed mind.
It is. And remembering like this isn't something that is happening to you. This is something that you have chosen to do and have the opportunity to do. And isn't that incredible?
Yeah. I will say the next thing that I want to share for me, this has been, many of these tools have been very helpful, whether it's turning to Jane Lynch and saying, you ever get nervous? And in a way, acknowledging it, normalizing it, knowing that by and large, almost every person that I ask that question to, Julianne Moore, does this ever make you nervous? Oh my God, I'm terrified all the time.
Yeah.
By and large, the answer is yes. Yes.
We are not alone.
We are not alone. But the next thing that I'm going to share is the thing that has absolutely altered my body's over the top response to performance situations. And that is, sing it along with me, meditation. I have been meditating for 8 or 9 years now, and it has been life-changing and career-changing. And I do get nervous still, for sure, but it doesn't feel like it's measured on the Richter scale like before.
Yeah.
It totally has brought it into the realm of what Betty Buckley and Carmine Gallo are talking about with performance energy. And I can totally deal with it. So again, thank you, Emily Fletcher and Ziva Meditation.
Yes.
Take a shot, y'all. I just said Emily Fletcher's name. You can go to zivameditation.com/spark to learn more about their good work.
This speaks to like that difference between panic attack and anxiety attack, because you're managing your anxiety literally every day because of your meditation. It's every day. So it's not building and accumulating as it might if you were not meditating and staying on top of the mind management.
Yeah. Spending 45 minutes to an hour every day managing this is an indicator of how much it needed to be managed.
Good point.
I make that investment every day because if I didn't, I probably would not perform again. And would probably, even like social anxiety, my life would look very different. Even living on the side of a mountain, if I'm honest, so much of this is a response to anxiety. It is creating a whole life. This podcast, like so much of it, this is how powerful and painful anxiety can be.
And also how exciting it can be when you build your life in a way that like sets you up to succeed, not suffer daily in a world feeling like you don't have any agency in how it's constructed.
It goes back to your spark about the highly sensitive person as well. I think there's a little bit of a dovetail in there. And I also just want to acknowledge how privileged this conversation is.
100%.
You know, that I could move, that I could learn how to meditate, that I like 100%. This is so fucking privileged. Yeah.
100%. And there are things that you can do at various levels. Like meditation is one of those things, although it has been commodified, you know, it is something that is essentially available and can be free or virtually free to anyone who is interested in doing it. You know, there's a whole,
and once you learn it, it's portable. It's
that's
absolutely.
Right. It's in you and with you.
That's right. That's right.
So I like for a variety of reasons, all of these, antidotes.
Well, let me give you some more. Some more tools for your toolkit. Another approach to getting your mind in order is, of course, we've talked about it here, working with a counselor. Janet Hiltz is a California-based anxiety coach, and Janet's preferred method is to extensively interview clients to get to the root of their performance fear, then apply counseling intervention techniques to help break the connection between the client's past trauma and their current behavior. She feels like the basis of, you know, these anxiety, panic attacks, performance anxiety is that there's some past trauma. She also says there are simple things that performers can do to help ensure a more anxiety-free performance experience, including there's the preparation piece, frequent rehearsals, and adds that there's nothing wrong with performers confessing their vulnerability on stage.
Yes.
Yeah. She says, a lot of times you can release emotional discomfort by just cracking a joke about being nervous. All the people in the audience are going to connect with you for having the courage to do something that would personally scare the pants off of them.
Yeah.
Janet Hiltz goes on to say, it all comes down to conquering demons and enlisting the crowd as an ally. And that's really in line with all the things we're talking about.
Yeah.
Bo Burnham's approach in his Kanye rant. Talking about the invisible elephant that's in the room that's standing on my chest.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
But here's a fun tool. You don't have to do it on stage. In her book, Insights, Tasha Eurich says, naming our emotions is a process that has a strong body of research shown to be effective. The simple act of translating our emotions into language versus simply experiencing them can stop our brains from activating our amygdala, the fight or flight command center, and this, in turn, helps us stay in control and present. Cams, you've heard me say those lines many times before with our coaching clients and in our classes and in our workshops.
Name it to tame it.
Name it to tame it. I will sit in the waiting rooms of auditions or in my dressing room on set, and if I feel my nervous system starting to excite, I will cup my hand over my mouth. I'll do this in public. And now you can do it wearing a mask and nobody can see your lips moving. I will conceal my mouth and narrate what's happening in my body. So I'll say, my breathing is shallow. I can feel my heart beat increasing. It feels like my body temperature is rising. It feels like my shoulders are tensing up and rising up. I feel like my breath is shallow. It feels like my heart rate it's still beating faster than normal, but maybe a little bit less so. My breathing still feels shallow. So I just observe and say out loud in real time. And when I do this, Laura, I can observe in real time my nervous system de-exciting.
That's exciting to just know that's how you have some say over what's happening. Really.
It is talking oneself down. You can, just by naming how you're feeling in your body, you can de-excite your own nervous system. And I've done this so many times. And I know it works for me. But everybody's little chemistry set is different. But I offer you that tool.
Yes, I think that's a great one.
Another useful tool is shifting the focus from yourself and your fear and onto your true purpose. So if you're a speaker, that could be contributing something of value to your audience. If you're and if you've listened to our episode on the power of why, you could drill down to your deepest, highest purpose. So your purpose, if you're a speaker and you're giving a talk, not only contributing something of value to your audience, but maybe changing lives or saving lives, depending on what you're freeing people of their own fear. If you're an actor, I find it very powerful to shift from thinking of myself. What does it look like when I do this? What does it sound like when I do this? Shifting that focus to caring for someone else or running my objective with my scene partner. So here's an example from my own life. If I'm shooting an episode of Bull and I'm playing an expert who's delivering expert testimony in a court trial, I have a choice. I can think anxiety producing thoughts like, oh God, please let me remember this complicated fucking line. Or I can think thoughts like, I'm going to do my best to convince this jury that I really know what I'm talking about and that I'm warm and that I'm credible. And ultimately, I'm going to help win this fake case for you know what I mean? Like when you start thinking, like looking at that jury and you're thinking, I'm going to influence them.
It's your intention.
You get the focus on the jury and not on yourself. And my nervous system de-excites and it all flows more easily. Yeah.
That's a good one.
So I want to read to you from Carmen Gallo's article in Forbes.com. In her book, Year of Yes, Shonda Rhimes, the creator of Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, and the complete Shonda universe, writes about the year she said yes to everything that scared her. Public speaking was one of her biggest fears. And she said, I was a walking panic attack. My stage fright was so complete and overwhelming that it ruled my every public appearance. So Shonda Rhimes, Year of Yes, accepted an invitation to deliver the commencement address at Dartmouth, her alma mater. And she was terrified, but she did it. And although she was scared and nervous, she stood at the podium, took a deep breath, which you can clearly see and hear in the video.
Mm-hmm.
Then she exhaled. And according to Rhymes, she then looked out at the sea of graduates and thought, the panic, the nerves I am searching for will not come to me today. I am no longer afraid to stand there alone at the podium. From that exhale forth, I am someone new, someone unafraid. For the first time in my life, I speak to an audience as myself, and I feel joy. So this leads me to the next set of tools in our anxiety response toolkit, physical approaches. And I'm going to start with Shonda Rhimes' nervous system de-exciter, breathing. I think that breathing might actually be the single most important thing that we talk about today.
100%.
When you consciously breathe deeply, it sends the body a message, a signal that the body is safe. And there are so many approaches to this. Box breathing is our go-to. If you've ever been in a class with us, you have heard us lead box breathing. Hell, I think I've done it on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But in case you missed it, I'll talk you through it now. And maybe I'll put some box breathing at the end of this episode after the closing theme, and you can keep it in your toolkit. But it goes like this. You breathe in through the nose on a 4 count. You hold for 4. You breathe out through the mouth on a 4 count, and you hold that for 4. So how about more on that after the closing theme plays, okay? Another physical thing that really has helped me is physical exertion. If I have a big audition and I could potentially get very anxious about it, a magical combo for me is strong preparation, meditating, which sort of addresses the mental piece and a bit of the breathing piece, actually, because when the nervous system de-excites, the breathing drops down, and weightlifting, lifting really heavy shit. That physical exertion really helps me to drain nerves and anxiety. It just drains right out of me. And I'll say some find that yoga really helps. Well, because yoga is a combination of the physical, the breathing, the mental, even the spiritual.
I mean, I just can't help but note how many of these things are also part of completing the stress cycle, from the burnout. So it makes perfect sense that you might find a combination of these things that would help to decrease the stress and anxiety, calm you right down.
Love it. Another one is something that little baby Cams and listeners of this podcast are familiar with, EFT tapping.
Mm-hmm.
EFT tapping is a combination of physical tapping and mental work that can address all kinds of anxiety. And if you haven't listened to our episode with EFT tapping expert Jenny Clift, go back and give that episode a spin.
Love Jenny Clift.
I learned another physical tool on the Anxiety Slayer podcast, which hosts Shan Vanderleek and Ananga Sivir, called the calming point. The calming point is an energy point found in the center of the palm of the hand that has a direct calming effect on the heart. So to find the calming point, you make a fist with your left hand and you look for where your middle finger touches your palm. That's your flip-off finger, where that touches your palm. Now, find that point and press that point with the thumb of your right hand for about a minute while you take deep, steady breaths. And you want to relax your jaw, and you want to let your shoulders drop and relax as you hold that point, and you keep taking slow, deep breaths and focus on making your outgoing breath longer. So that is the calming point.
I like that. I'll be over here doing this.
You sit over there and you do that. Sometimes I think one of the keys with this stuff is remembering them when the heat is on.
That's right.
Because I don't know, unless I tattoo it backwards on myself memento style, so I'm looking in a backstage mirror and remember it, I don't know if I'm going to remember the calming point.
Mm-hmm.
The calming point would also be a wonderful name for a new age album. The calming point.
I was going to say, or a retreat center where you go to the calming point.
Have you been to the calming point in Sedona?
I was just there yesterday.
Love it.
I'm going to call it like my little, like some corner of my house, the calming point.
I love that. The calming point. You know what? Nathan and I are always joking about what we should name our house.
Oh.
Right now we call it Palmyra, which is it's a Bond villain lair in one of the Bond films. Welcome to Palmyra. So we call it that. But the calming point would also be a wonderful name for it. And I also just had another spark, which is, can they tattoo the palm of your hand? Would that hurt like a motherfucker?
I think it would hurt like a motherfucker, but you could put a little, I would like put a little X or put a little heart right there so you know exactly where that spot is.
The calming point.
The calming point.
Right. So many sparks in this episode. I want to talk about another little tool in our toolkit, a little drawer maybe in our toolkit. I just want to acknowledge that some people choose medication or natural remedies to help reduce their symptoms of performance anxiety. Mm-hmm. Laurence Olivier, convinced that his stage fright was about to send him into what he was sure would be reported as a mystifying and scandalously sudden retirement, finally confided his distress to actress Dame Sybil Thorndike and her husband. And Dame Sybil responded, "Take drugs, darling. We do."
Oh, God.
So while I respect Dame Sybil and all the others who respond well to medication to address their performance anxiety, I just want to say that this has been a very imperfect solution for me. For me, while it works wonders for some folks, medication has left me feeling nervous and sleepy. So I'll sometimes see a clip of me on a TV show that I did where I was trying to use medication to help address some of this performance anxiety. And it's like my eyelids are at half mast while I'm just like delivering expert testimony. You know what I mean? So but for some, it really is an invaluable part of their response to performance anxiety and panic attacks. And I totally love and respect that for folks. But you would want to talk to your physician to find out what would be the most appropriate treatment for you. And then sometimes that stuff takes calibration.
100%. And there are also natural, dare I say remedies? I don't even know if that's true, but like magnesium, it's not technically like being medicated, but if your doctor thought that was a good idea, it's over the counter, magnesium to calm those nerves.
Absolutely. I'd like to recommend the Anxiety Slayer podcast. That podcast, they have like 5 million episodes. They've been making that podcast for a long time. And there are many resources on that podcast. But on the chemical tip, I want to share some info I heard on the Anxiety Slayer podcast. Caffeine is a big culprit in the provocation of anxiety. And symptoms caused by caffeine can include sleep disturbance, adrenal fatigue, interference with natural dopamine and adrenaline production. And according to that podcast, coffee doesn't give energy. It sets off a reaction in the body that provokes stress hormones to provide a burst of alertness. In other words, caffeine jolts the body into fight or flight mode. So having a well-rested body and mind is essential for anxiety recovery. So my caffeine lovers, do what you will with that.
Oof, that's a tough one to take. I might have to cancel this entire Spark. I'm kidding.
This Spark has been canceled. Major backlash on this Spark. So I want to say this. If you're having panic attack symptoms, whether it's while you're fast asleep, Laura Camion, or you're in a mall or at a bank or backstage at Carnegie Hall, the Mayo Clinic website urges you to seek medical help as soon as possible. Panic attacks, while intensely uncomfortable, are not dangerous. But panic attacks are hard to manage on your own, and they may get worse without treatment. Panic attack symptoms can also resemble symptoms of other serious health problems, such as a heart attack. So it's important to get evaluated by a doctor if you aren't sure what's causing your symptoms. I just want to make sure that I have stated that super clearly.
And also, so, we are not doctors.
Did we mention we're not doctors? I wish some university would let us speak at their commencement and give us honorary doctorates, so we could say we're not medical.
We're not medical doctors. I mean, we are doctors, but
have you seen my weird hat and sash? Let's talk about what we make of it. We've already talked about so many things.
Gosh.
the tattoo you're going to get, the calming point that you're going to set up in your house. If you're Bo Burnham, you can put it into your comedy. If you're the band, you put it into your 70s song Stage Fright with lyrics like, your brow is sweating and your mouth gets dry. The moment of truth is right at hand. If you're me or you and you're grappling with this, you launch an investigation so that you can discern what is at the center of your anxiety, what triggers it, and how you can address it. Because Laura and I want you to be able to be self-expressed and to enjoy your life.
Yes.
So it's worth taking the time to investigate it, to get to the bottom of it and see what responses to it might work for you. And if you know that if you're like me and you know that learning complicated lines or having a camera pointed at you or being on a Broadway stage triggers your anxiety, you can keep doing that. But you can also start a podcast where you can be self-expressed without memorizing lines or having people look at you. This just might grow your confidence to the point where the other stuff, that historically anxiety-provoking stuff, it actually gets easier and easier and easier. I mean, hypothetically speaking. But this is my spark for the day. I know it's a big one. And again, there is so much information that I gathered, and it's easily accessed. Like you all can find it too, but I urge you to take the time. If you're struggling with this, take the time and start your own investigation, because, oh man, just like to be in flow, to be self-expressed, but also to get to be in flow and to enjoy your life and your creative work more as a result, it's worth it.
Amen to that. Amen to that. To get to feel the freedom and the pleasure of doing the thing you've chosen to do because you know you want to do it, and to be able to do it with less pain and with less anxiety is just a beautiful thing.
Oh,
Suze, what a great spark.
Woo, Lord. I learned a lot on that one. News I can use.
Too.
And I hopefully that other people can use as well.
I think so.
And listen, we mean this sincerely, because this spark is so vast. If there are things that you feel like would be useful tools that we didn't even glide across the surface of, message us, email us, send it in, because we would love to make sure that gets shared out.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Please share things that are working for you.
Anyway.
Suze, amazing spark. Wow.
That's it. That's my monster spark. And this has been another episode of the Spark File. And it was made on Muncie, Lenape, and Seminole land. Yes, and as always, we hope that this put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen, if there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that, we hope you'll email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We'll even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you got to share a creative risk that you have taken recently.
Oh yeah. You can follow us at social media at The Spark File, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and 5-star review this podcast. It really helps others find us. Please. If you like this podcast, we hope you'll share it with people that you love. And if you didn't like it, did you know that studies have shown that not liking this podcast is one of the main indicators that you will have a panic attack?
I had no idea.
If I was a research scientist, I would say things like that. But I'm not.
And that is why we're not getting our doctorates.
Some of this research may not be true. That's right. That is not happening.
If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we're writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to take it
and make it.
Make it.
Make it, baby.
Don't forget, we're going to do some breathing in just a moment.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I I jump into my spark fire. Let's open up the spark fire.
All right, if you're still with us, let's do a little box breathing to de-excite the nervous system. It's very simple. You're going to inhale through your nose on a 4 count. You're going to hold that breath for a 4 count. You're going to exhale out of your mouth for a 4 count, and you're going to hold that for a 4 count. And I'm going to talk you through it. When you're doing this, when you feel like your nervous system is sort of, a little activated, what you're looking for is for something to change. And that can mean that your breath drops down. It can mean that you feel like your heart rate slows down a little bit or your shoulders drop. You're just looking for something to change. And sometimes that change can be your mind wanders. That can be a change too. So we're going to do this box breathing until you detect something changes. And if I finish counting and you still need to keep breathing, you can either keep your own count or just rewind a few minutes to the top of this and start again. Here we go. In through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth. 2, 3, 4, hold that. 2, 3, 4, in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4, in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4, in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4, in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4, in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4, and through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4, and through the nose, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, hold that, 2, 3, 4. Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.